Hey, welcome to Anime What Ifs. This is part 15 of What If Naruto Married Temari. Sakura stared through the ceiling as she lay restrained on the bed. She wasn't seeing the ceiling. Her mind was stuck in a continuous loop. Leaning in closer to the trembling girl, he sneered as he whispered in her ear. You were always and will always be worthless, and now, everyone will know it. Her body trembled as she fought back a scream of despair, and unbeknownst to her, tears streamed down her face. Her mind began to flash forward from that moment. Running from the council room blinded by tears, she'd found herself in the marketplace. Without stopping to think, she'd bought an immense amount of sake and fled to the park to drown her sorrows. She really hadn't expected to awaken. The amount of sake she'd downed should have killed her, but it seemed that Ino, Temari, and Hinata's medical training paid off. For them anyway. Sakura had raged at them for ruining her death before she'd pulled out a kunai and slashed it up her left arm. A bloody frantic struggle ensued when the other girls took the kunai away, but not before she'd partly opened her right arm as well. As the darkness closed in, she'd felt a measure of peace. At least the pain would finally end. Once again, she hadn't expected to waken, especially not restrained to the bed. She begged and pleaded for her friends to let her go, and when they refused, she ranted and raved, cursing them with every vile insult she could think of. Eventually she realized that they weren't even listening to her, and she retreated into her own mind. She was midway through another loop when she felt a warm hand on her shoulder and heard the words she had waited for, even if she didn't really know it. Hello, Sakura-chan. The words were almost meaningless, distantly acknowledged by part of her mind as she focused on the concern and warmth with which they were spoken. Shifting her gaze from the ceiling to her old teammate, Sakura felt a maelstrom of emotions when she saw Naruto. Rage, guilt, humiliation, despair, she felt all of these and more as she met his concerned gaze. They began to drown her and she panted, struggling to breathe. Naruto watched the emotions spark in Sakura's eyes and briefly flashed back to the time when he'd felt them himself. He knew all too well how she felt, and he was determined that his friend wouldn't have to suffer alone like he had. Seeing her begin to panic, Naruto drew a kunai and cut through the restraints on her arms and pulled her into a hug. Shoo, it's okay, Sakura. Let it out. As Naruto wrapped her in his arms, his words sparked a torrent from the pink-haired girl. How could he? She howled. How could he do this to me? Sobbing into his shoulder, she whispered to Naruto. I did everything he wanted, I did everything they wanted. How could they just throw me away? I gave him everything. Was it not good enough? Naruto gently stroked Sakura's back as she cried and whispered her pain. It took everything he had not to go kill Sasuke and Sakura's parents, but he forced himself to calm down. We can settle accounts later, he thought viciously. He shifted his head so he could see the girl crying on his shoulder. For now, let's get you well, Sakura-chan. Belatedly, he realized he was still holding the kunai he'd sliced her restraints with and hastily tossed it away. The sound of the kunai hitting the floor caused Sakura to jerk her head back, and a ghost of a smile played across her face when she saw his embarrassed expression. Naruto, you've changed since you were my teammate, but you're still you. Grimacing, Naruto rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Say, Sakura-chan, would you like to get out of this room? Not trusting her voice, Sakura nodded. She flinched when Naruto drew another kunai to cut through the restraints on her ankles, and when she tried to stand, she would have fallen if he hadn't caught her. Naruto, she said weakly. My legs. Without stopping to think, Naruto scooped the frail girl into a bridal carry, getting a squeak of embarrassment from Sakura. It's okay. Naruto told her with a grin. Temari-chan told me you've been on that bed for the last 2 weeks. It'll take a bit to adjust to moving around again. Naruto, put me down. Sakura pouted. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, I will once we get outside, alright? Sakura felt some of her temper flaring but nodded resignedly. As weak as she felt, and as stubborn as Naruto was, she'd have to stab him to stop him, and she didn't feel up to it. A voice in her head disagreed, but she had long experience ignoring it. Besides, even if I did manage to get a kunai and stab him, he probably still wouldn't drop me. Blissfully unaware of Sakura's inner dialogue, Naruto cautiously carried her downstairs, worried about the girl's physical condition. Being more or less chained to a bed for 2 weeks had not done Sakura any favors, and he was deeply concerned with how fragile she felt. If he was completely honest with himself, he wasn't really sure which worried him more: her physical or her mental health. His eyes took a hard, determined edge. It doesn't matter, Temari and I will have to fix both. When Naruto carried her outside, Sakura squeezed her eyes closed from the near blinding light of the sun. With her eyes closed, she relished the wind as it blew through her messy hair. The scent of flowers and growing things made her realize Naruto had brought her to the garden, and she opened her eyes when she felt him carefully lowering her to a bench near the koi pond. Sitting Sakura on the bench, Naruto backed up to watch Sakura's reaction. So far, she hadn't been reacting like the Sakura-chan he knew, and it worried him. He'd picked her up expecting her to hit him, or at the very least tell him off for it, and her lack of a reaction bothered him. He knew she would need to talk if she was ever to recover from her recent trauma, but how the hell was he supposed to approach the girl nervously running her fingers over the fresh scars on her wrists? A soft rustling in a nearby bush gave him his answer, and he allowed himself to smile. No kunoichi he'd ever met had been able to resist his next move. Even Tsunade had fallen prey to it. Naruto softly whistled so as not to disturb Sakura from her thoughts, and a furry head poked up from the rustling bush. Naruto nodded a greeting to Fox and passed on an order. "Go get Reynard, please. I need him." The fox yipped and ran off. Turning back to Sakura, Naruto crossed his arms across his chest and watched her trailing her fingers in the koi pond with a sad expression on her face. So caught up in watching Sakura, Naruto failed to notice Reynard's arrival until the fox scared the hell out of him by speaking right behind him. "You needed something, Naruto-sama?" Naruto swore he heard a light undertone of amusement, and he turned to glare at his furry minion in annoyance. "That's not funny, you know," he said somewhat crossly. Reynard dipped his head. "Of course not, my lord." Naruto resisted the urge to yank Reynard's whiskers and settled with massaging his temples. "If you're done mocking me, I need you to bring me one of the kits. Preferably one of the really cute ones." Reynard eyed Sakura warily. "Are you sure, Naruto-sama? Your guest seems somewhat disturbed." Naruto leaned down and petted Reynard's head. "Don't worry, the kid will be safe, I promise you that. I just need some way to get her to open up, and I know you've seen how women react to the little fuzzballs." Reynard's body language was distinctly amused as he loped back into the bushes. Oh yes, he knew how the human women reacted to the kits, and he thought it was hilarious. He'd even taken extra delight in sending kits after Temari because the woman tried to resist but melted every time. Perhaps the only reaction that amused him more was when the Hokage visited one day. That had been downright hysterical. It didn't take him long to grab the kit he wanted and return to Naruto. His amusement grew when he saw Naruto's eyes widen slightly in surprise. Yes, this was his ultimate weapon, the kit he'd personally trained to turn any kunoichi to mush. Naruto tried to hide his shock when he saw the small red vixen following Reynard, but he suspected Reynard had seen it anyway. "Sweet Kami Reynard, is that Scarlett?" The little vixen bounced over to Naruto and butted her head against his leg almost like a cat. Reynard chuckled at Scarlett's antics. "Yes, Naruto-sama, this is indeed Scarlett. She seems pleased that you remember her." Naruto knelt and picked up the excited kit. "How could I forget?" Naruto said, rolling his eyes as he scratched Scarlett's ears. "I thought Temari-chan had gotten over the whole cuteness thing until the day you unleashed this little lady on her." Both Naruto and Reynard reflexively looked around for Temari. The aftermath of that event had been somewhat painful for both, and Temari did not like being reminded of it. Still, it wasn't every day you caught a kunoichi like Temari giggling as they rolled around on the deck playing with a small animal. Shaking off his amusement, Naruto turned towards Sakura with a frown. She was still trailing her fingers in the pond while she stared off in space. The only good thing is that she didn't seem nearly as worked up as she'd been inside. It was a good idea to get her out of that room, Naruto thought as he walked towards her. Sakura was thinking over the recent events, but not as bitterly as before. She hated to admit it to herself, but crying on Naruto's shoulder had let her vent some of the pain. It still hurt, but she didn't feel like she was drowning anymore. Wrapped up in her thoughts, she didn't notice Naruto until he plopped a small red ball of fur in her lap. Looking up, prepared to tell him off for interrupting her, Sakura froze when she made eye contact with the fox kit. Almost against her will, her hand snaked up to pet the small fox, and when it curled up to sleep on her lap, she squealed. "Naruto, this is the cutest little fox." Naruto rolled his eyes. Scarlett was scary good at that. "Sakura-chan, meet Scarlett." "Scarlett, Sakura-chan," Naruto said, introducing them. "Scarlett here is the one that made Temari-chan." Naruto paused. "Yeah, well, Scarlett has a way with people." Sakura frowned, still running her hand over Scarlett's silky fur. "What about Temari-san?" Naruto blanked his face. "I don't really want to die, but I can say that even Temari-chan is not immune to cute." Sakura couldn't help it, she giggled, and as she pictured Temari glomping Scarlett, she began to laugh. Her laughter quickly turned somewhat hysterical and then into tears. The laughter breaking through the emotional barriers all shinobi erect to protect themselves. Naruto watched as Sakura broke down with a sense of satisfaction. She was hugging Scarlett closely to herself and Naruto let her tears wind down. When Sakura finally subsided to occasional sniffs, Naruto moved closer and gently took Scarlett from her hands. Scratching her ears, he sent her on her way and sat down next to Sakura. "Why did he do it?" Sakura asked Naruto in a whisper. Naruto looked up at the sky as he considered his answer. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he suspected more than just one motive. He wasn't sure that Sakura was in any condition to deal with that. Ultimately, his decision boiled down to the simple fact that she had a right to know. "I'm not entirely sure, Sakura-chan. I think there were multiple reasons and most of them probably revolve around me." Sakura stared at him. "You? What do you mean revolve around you? You remember how he wants to kill his brother?" When Sakura nodded, Naruto continued his explanation. "After our fight where I crippled him, Sasuke added me to that list. I know he did. Ever since, he's been looking for ways to get back at me since he can't actually fight me." Naruto took a deep breath and knelt to look Sakura right in the eyes. "Temari and I believe that the only reason he married you was to use it against me." Sakura sucked in a breath to tell Naruto off before reality hit. It made sense. Sakura was far from stupid, and now that her blinders were forcibly removed, she could use that intellect to its full extent. "He used me," she growled, clenching her fist. Looking up, she met Naruto's eyes again. "That son of a bitch used me." Naruto nodded. "And when he didn't have a use for you anymore and he saw the chance for more power," he said softly, "he fucking took it and abandoned me." Sakura yelled, finishing Naruto's sentence. Naruto sat next to her on the bench and leaned back with a sigh. "Yeah, that's pretty much it." Sakura sat quivering in anger as she fought against her inner personality cries for Sasuke's blood. The inner battle abruptly ended when she remembered what Temari had told her about her parents. "What about my parents?" Naruto frowned. "I don't really know. Temari said that Ino told her that your parents were the ones that more or less aimed you at Sasuke. According to Ino, when Sasuke kicked you out of the Uchiha clan, they disowned you from the shame." Sakura stared at her feet. Maybe everyone was right. If even her parents thought so, maybe she really was worthless. Naruto had a very good idea of what was going through Sakura's head and he needed to stop it. "Sakura-chan, you know the burden I carry, don't you?" Sakura nodded. After the arena fights where Ino ended up in Naruto's head, everyone knew. "I've been where you are," Naruto said quietly. "When I was younger, there was a time that I despaired, that I thought I deserved the treatment I received." Sakura opened her mouth to say something, but Naruto raised a hand to stop her. "Do you want to know what I discovered?" Sakura ran her thumbs along the scars marking her wrists. It was hard to believe that Naruto could ever have felt like that, but remembering the image of the Kyuubi, Sakura shivered. Perhaps it wasn't so far-fetched after all. "If you think it will help, yes, I would like to hear it." Naruto shifted on the bench to face her and make eye contact. "I discovered that it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of you. All that matters is what you think of yourself." It sounds simple, but it's really not. Naruto stood up and began to pace. "If people believe in you, use that strength. If people ridicule you, use that as fuel to prove them wrong." Glancing back at her, Naruto saw flickers of the girl he knew in her eyes. "I've talked it over with Temari-chan. Until you get back on your feet, you're welcome to stay here with us." Sakura stared at him suspiciously. "Temari-san agreed? She really doesn't like me." Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. "Yeah, you're right about that, but she knows that this is important to me." "You do remember the one thing Kakashi-sensei actually taught us, right?" Sakura nodded with a small smile. "Those that break the rules are trash. But those that abandon their comrades are lower than trash." Naruto finished. Extending an arm, Naruto helped Sakura to her feet and let her lean on him to keep her balance. "Don't think that this is done though, Sakura-chan. You're feeling better now, I can tell, but I really think you should talk to Ino-chan to avoid going back into the dark." Sakura stayed silent as she hobbled along beside Naruto to the house. She owed Ino, Temari and Hinata an apology before anything else, but Naruto was probably right about the need to talk. "You're going to make him pay, aren't you?" "Oh, you can count on it, Sakura-chan," Naruto replied grimly. Sakura tightened her grip on his arm. "I want in." Naruto gave her a smile showing his elongated incisors. "Of course, Sakura-chan. Wouldn't dream of not including my teammate." Entering the house, Sakura discovered why Naruto had dragged her back in. Gathered in the kitchen and living room were most of the kunoichi their age and several from the medical classes. He must have heard them or had a clone watching or something, Sakura thought. Feeling extremely uneasy surrounded by all the kunoichi, Naruto leads Sakura over to where Temari was sitting by the vase of flowers and the box Niji gave him. Helping Sakura into a chair, Naruto moved to his wife and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. "We need to talk," he whispered while he did so. Eyes flashing, Temari stood stiffly and followed him from the room. Heading downstairs, Naruto led her to his study and she crossed her arms across her chest and scowled when he activated the privacy seals. "The answer is no, Naruto," she said as soon as the room was sealed. "I'm not displeased that you got her up and moving, but I will not accept her as a sister wife." Naruto stared at Temari with his jaw hanging open. "What the hell? Temari-chan? What are you talking about?" Temari shifted uncomfortably. It seemed she may have jumped to the wrong conclusion. "Isn't that why you brought me down here?" Naruto sat behind the desk and thumped his head on the hardwood. "Temari-chan, I'm pretty sure we've gone over this. Yes, she is one of my precious people. Yes, I did have a major crush on her, and yes, I do very much care for her. I do, however, not want to marry her." "Oh," Temari replied quietly, a faint blush on her cheeks. "Well, what did you need to speak with me about? What do you know of Danzo Shimura?" Naruto asked softly. Temari uncrossed her arms and glided over to sit on the edge of the desk. "Just what I've seen in the council meetings. He seems rather militant, but there will always be someone like that on a shinobi council." Naruto chuckled grimly and dug out a worn leather-backed book. "Here," he said, tossing it to her. "That is my father's journal. Don't take it from this room, the seals on it will detonate if you try, but you should read it. Especially the part about Danzo and Root. Trust me, Temari-chan, he really isn't normal for a shinobi council. Temari raised an eyebrow at her husband. Alright, I can read this, but why are you bringing this up now? I had a conversation with the man today. I tried to get him to stop backing Sasuke, but I don't think it worked. That man and his agents are dangerous to us, Temari-chan. Ero-sennin told me once that the most dangerous weapon for a shinobi is information. Naruto pointed at the book in her hands. That is information. Temari examined the book in her hands carefully. It was rare for Naruto to be this serious outside of a fight. She was going to have to make time for this journal. She didn't see Naruto reaching for her. Pulling his startled wife into his lap, Naruto wrapped his arms around Temari from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. So, he whispered. What's with all the kunoichi? Temari sighed and raised her hand to pat his cheek. I told you Ino somehow convinced me to hold kunoichi meetings here while you were gone. Naruto groaned. You mean this is a weekly thing? Temari reluctantly stood and pulled Naruto out of the chair. Yes, weekly. We've also been down here for a while and need to get back to our guests. Naruto pouted. Do I have to? He whined. Temari grinned and smacked the back of his head lightly. Yes, at least this once. It would be rude of the host not to put in an appearance. Naruto thought about pointing out that technically he had made an appearance but decided it just wasn't worth the effort. Even if he won on technical points, Temari was perfectly capable of dragging him upstairs by his ear. Sighing in defeat, he extended his arm and Temari linked hers with a victorious smile. No doubt she did that reading my mind thing women do, Naruto thought sourly as he deactivated the privacy seals. More or less dragged upstairs by Temari, Naruto was forced to greet the assembled kunoichi, most of whom had been Uchiha fangirls if his memory served him correctly. It was fairly nauseous when they all simpered and flirted with him, and his only consolation was that judging from the nails digging into his arm, Temari didn't like it either. Finally done, Naruto led Temari back to the kitchen table where the girls he actually knew were sitting around chatting. Well, sobbing on the other's shoulders for Sakura and Ino, chatting for Tenten and Hinata. Guiding Temari to her chair, something that got him a glower from his wife, Naruto sank into the chair next to it with a groan. That sucked, Tebeo. He said tiredly. To think he'd once envied Sasuke his fangirls. Completely agreeing but wanting to change the subject, Temari picked up the wrapped box and pointed at the flowers. So, what's in the box and why the flowers? Naruto cursed under his breath, out of the fire and into the frying pan indeed. Well, I got the flowers 'cause I missed you while I was gone. Hey! Ino cut in. That's not what you told me at the shop. Ignoring Naruto's frantic gestures to shut up behind Temari's back, she gave him a wicked grin. I thought you told me they were I left on a month-long mission, only leaving a note, please don't kill me, flowers. While Temari assumed a thoughtful face, Naruto hissed at Ino. Hate you so much right now, you evil woman. Ino just laughed and stuck her tongue out at him. With everything that happened, I had forgotten about that. Temari said slowly. Naruto felt ice creep up his spine when she swiveled her head to glare at him. I'm so happy you could help me remember, Naruto. Naruto was sweating under the joint death glares of the 5 kunoichi at the table. Making up his mind to flee and perhaps take them on at better odds, he froze when Temari grabbed his wrist. No, Naruto. You're not flashing away tonight. Damn it, how the hell does she do that? So, if the flowers are a bribe for your life, what's in the box? Naruto shrugged. I don't know, Niji said it was to you from Koyukiheim, from the land of snow. Extremely curious now, Temari opened the box and slid a note and an envelope out. Seeing the note had Naruto's name on it, she slid it over to Naruto and opened the envelope. Naruto recognized the handwriting on the front of the note as Niji's and opened it. Consider us even for the explosive clones. He read out loud, puzzled. What the hell is that supposed to mean? He cut off mid-sentence when he felt Temari's killer intent bear down on him. What the hell? What was in that envelope? Temari held some sort of photograph in her hands as her eyes shot daggers at her husband. So, you like kissing princesses, do you? At this point, Naruto was beyond confused. He didn't know why Temari and the other kunoichi were so angry, but it obviously had something to do with that picture. I don't know what you're talking about. What is that picture? Snorting with disgust, Temari flipped the photo to him. Picking it up, his jaw dropped in shock. In the picture, he was being kissed by Koyuki. When the hell was this? I sure don't remember. Wait. Examining the picture closer, he saw that he was bandaged and he recognized the room. This is in the hospital, but I don't remember this at all. Looking up and meeting Temari's fulminating glare, Naruto forced himself to maintain eye contact. I recognize the room, but I swear to you, Temari-chan, I don't remember this. I was unconscious most of the time I was at that hospital. Hinata grabbed the picture from his hand and examined it. It's true, she said, barely stuttering. Naruto-kun only lays like this when he is unconscious. As everyone at the table including Naruto turned to stare at her, she let out an eep and tried to duck into her coat. Temari pinched the bridge of her nose, feeling a migraine coming on. I don't think I even want to know why Hinata can tell if Naruto is unconscious just from his posture. Why is everything with him so damn complicated? Ino picked up the photo Hinata dropped and flipped it over. Hey, fangirl, there's a note on the back for you. Taking the picture from Ino with a frown, Temari flipped it over and read the back, face flushing with anger. Temari Uzumaki Namikaze. If what I've heard about you from Naruto is true, you are blunt and prefer to deal with things directly. I wish to buy your husband from you. As you can see from the picture, I have staked my claim. Please contact me to discuss terms and payment. Koyuki Kazahana, Daimyo Land of Snow. Finishing reading the letter out loud, Temari glared at her husband. Naruto sighed. I had nothing to do with this, but that's not going to matter, is it? Seeing his answer in the stony gazes of the kunoichi at the table, Naruto made a break for the garden, the girls right on his heels. He put up a good fight, but the girls eventually cornered him near the back edge of the grounds and pounded him into the ground. Satisfied with their work, the girls left back to the house, leaving a twitching Naruto in a body-sized crater. After the kunoichi left, Reynard approached the crater cautiously. Naruto-sama, I do not understand. You could easily have defeated them with the exception of your mate. Why would you let them do this? Seeing the coast was clear, Naruto popped up and brushed himself off, looking only slightly worse for wear. Sitting on the edge of the crater, he wrapped an arm around Reynard's neck and laughed. Well, 1, it was kind of fun and it's the first time all 5 of them worked together for anything. 2, sometimes it's better to just take the hit. You heard them when they left. They got all that anger and frustration out of their system and they feel better now. Seems a high price to pay. Reynard said dryly, looking at the obviously insane human sitting next to him. Nah, they weren't going all out. You do realize you're sitting on the edge of a crater they made by slamming you into the ground, right? Before Naruto could respond, as if it were a signal, the largest of the shinobi charged at Naruto in a berserk manner. Calmly judging the distance, Naruto allowed the man to close, then swept to the side, summoning his kodachi from the storage seal on his arm as he moved. With a flash of steel only barely seen by the man's companions, his head slid from his body as he collapsed. Flicking his blade to clear the blood, Naruto dropped into his mother's kenjutsu stance, Reynard standing to his flank growling threateningly. I think you have it wrong. Who says you get a choice? Hope you liked this episode. The next one is coming soon.